This is going to be awesome. We've been looking forward to this. How many of you guys, this is like the highlight of the whole, yeah, I know, it's been awesome. So really excited to be here. I'm going to introduce each of our speakers as if they need it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So first of all, to my immediate right is the one and only Austin McChord, founder of Datto and a whole bunch of other things. And we'll let him talk about what he wishes to talk about in a minute. Also, Dave Bellini, co-founder of ConnectWise, Connect On, the MSP, the very first one, just right over there. And then also Chris Day, who's been co-founder of everything from Fully Managed to ScalePad to IT Glue, all sorts of things. So we're genuinely privileged to have all three of you here. I think we were all kind of like shocked that you all said yes. So we're going to jump right in. Our plan today is to cover, we're going to do something neat. We're going to do the past, the present, and the future. So we're going to talk a little bit about the days that got us to where we're at today. We're going to get some insights into where we're at now as MSPs, and then we're going to go into what we think the future might look like. This is unfiltered. We're going to say what we wish to say, so bear with us through that. And then also questions at the end. If you have questions, and we've left a lot of time for them, so please jump in if there's been a burning question. So first of all, I'm going to just start with maybe each of you just to say hello and break the ice, and anything you want to say about yourself or what you've been doing lately would be great, and then we'll jump into some questions. So Austin, we'll start with you.
Oh, man. So hello. I have not done a panel like this in a while, so it feels both at home and very strange at the same time. But the energy from the MSPs is just really cool and like makes me miss this space a lot, just sitting here. And then, yeah, I don't know. What was the second?
Just what you've been doing lately.
What have I been doing? Oh, my gosh. Well, we don't have enough time to cover all of that. But most recently, I bought a giant abandoned coal power plant, and I'm turning it into the world's coolest public park. And so that's where all the money's going to disappear to. But yeah. So yeah, just imagine like a 12-year-old won the lottery and like, thank you.
I don't know how I follow that up. So David Bellini, gosh, I was in retirement after we sold ConnectWise, and then Adam Slutskin pulled me out of it. I was wonderful for the first 18 months, and then after that, the second 18 months, I got really, really bored. So got back in the industry, started doing this to keep myself occupied, and I've really enjoyed, the whole MSP community. So invested in a couple different MSP software tools, and then, of course, CyberFox. So, yeah, it's fun to be back.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I've been in the MSP world for 98 years. I think 2002 is when I started my first IT service provider. It was not called Fully Managed back then. Over the next kind of 18 years, we eventually sold that to one of the largest telcos in Canada. We were about 400 employees, and it was, since then have been through many other things in the space. Obviously, IT Glue was a big one. Kind of found a new kind of missing piece of the MSP stack, I guess. Since then, I've been involved, obviously, in ScalePad as a co-founder, and we've done 5 acquisitions inside of ScalePad as well. Many of those companies that I invested in through family office that I set up maybe 10 years ago. So, yeah. Still in the space, now taking over as the CEO of ScalePad, and super excited about the next chapter here around innovation. So,
love it. We're going to jump into all of that. So, I thought you had a question. Cool. So, Austin, I'm going to go to you first. Everyone knows Datto, but I don't think a lot of people know what the early days of Datto were like. Can you kind of help us peek into what that world was like? Was it right out of a garage, Steve Jobs style? Where did it come from? And give us a peek at what those days were like.
They're terrible. Would be the way to describe it. So I started Datto right out of college. The reason I started it out of college is because I was a terrible college student. So I graduated with a 2.2 GPA, and my dream was to not have to tell people that. And so, I was like, I will start a startup, I will fail at it, and then I will tell people, oh yeah, I did the startup after college, and then hire me. And so I started Datto with that concept in a basement, and sort of made it all up. Like I Googled how to do this stuff. I learned a lot about how to write all the programming, and I soldered all the original units together and stored all the data in a basement for a while. And so like that was like the very, very beginning was like awful. And like they were like, oh, you should go raise money. And like all I would do is like talk to people and they'd like laugh me out of the room. And they're like, this is a hardware company. What hardware experience do you have? And I was like, none. And they're like, bye. And so, yeah, it was not good, would be the way to describe the early days. we eventually found the MSP community, or actually the MSP community found us. So we managed to get a product out there. We begged publications to write about it. Some people wrote some reviews, and some MSPs called and they were like, hey, do you guys have a reseller program? And we were like, no, not really. And like by the time the third MSP called and asked that question, we were like, good news, it launches in 2 hours. Call back then. And so we created a reseller program, and from that, like the community took us in, and everything that I know about business, I basically learned from MSPs. And I think about like the HTG dinners and like sitting at these dinners with the people who like had actually run MSPs, and they're talking about their business, and they're talking about P&Ls and like growing and how to think about all the different stuff and margins and everything else. And I was just like, these people are gods. Like I have to learn all of this. And like got really lucky that like the community is like, hey, your product doesn't suck. So we'll keep selling it and you keep figuring out the business thing. And slowly like Datto got bigger until all of a sudden Datto started getting bigger really, really fast. And then, dealt with that. And like I can take you through that story too if people want, but like that's okay, we'll keep going. So like that was weird. And it was like, oh my gosh, we graduated out of a basement and we moved to a real office, and then like hired real employees, and they were like, why are you driving around in Power Wheels cars in the office? And we were like, why would we not? And so like that was just this crazy world where like you just have to keep changing everything. And we probably moved offices like 3 times in 2 years just because we kept growing. And you bring these new people in, and like the way that we talked about it is like we would hire the chip China, and like most of our recruiting is like people that came from Craigslist. And I remember I hired a guy in support because his initials were WWW, and he was wearing an iPod Nano as a watch, and I was like, this is our kind of person. And like, we hired another person that actually like super successful at Datto. He was working at Wayback Burger and had an Ubuntu tattoo, and I was just like, you need to come work for us. And so brought this like band of travelers together. And what's wild is that because so little was defined and because it was chaos, like only people who loved chaos were successful, and everyone kind of fell in love with the mission. And because the start of it was like, these MSPs are God, and they are the reason why we are successful and why we can pay people's mortgages, like there was so much alignment. And it's wild that we didn't think about it at all at the time, but that like built this North Star into the team. And what ended up happening is that a big company came along and actually offered to buy Datto. And I said no. And they were like, we'll pay you $100 million. And I had all the equity because I had no investors and I didn't know how to do stock options. And I was still like, no. And so like at that point, like you realize, one, like, holy shit, I love what I'm doing. And 2, oh my God, my business is worth $100 million and I just said no. And so like that was also like a big turning point of like, maybe I should think about running this for real instead of like this funny project that I come in and do all the time. At that point, that's actually when Datto went and was like, oh, we'll go get outside investors. And so we talked to outside investors, and we were super picky, and we picked people that had actually built businesses before. And they came in, and it's funny because you look back and you realize like how much restraint they must have had like in dealing with us, because we were like, we know what we're doing. There's 100 people who work here and all this stuff is going on. And they're like, your chief operating officer's previous experience was cable installer. Like, you do not have a budget. Like, all of these things. What is your plan? We sell more next month than this month. Like, and they're like, maybe you should think of these things as things to fix. And so very slowly, like, we just sort of always were like, how do we get better? How do we figure this out? And so learned all of this stuff. And the investors were able to like help us hire actual adults who had been at businesses before. And I'm sure they were like, no, don't worry. Like there's something real here. Trust me. When we like show them around this crazy office and all the craziness. And then like the process as we grow through that is just like, how do we not lose what made the beginning special. And like what's fun, and I'm sure like the CyberFox people will tell you, is like they're in the part where like the special comes easy. And like starting these new companies at this time, and basically everybody exhibiting here is like the special comes easy and they just get it and they believe it and they don't feel like they need to pitch you right now. They just want to tell you what they're working on and why it's exciting. And it turns out like the really hard part in business as you grow these things is like keeping that special core alive. And I think we did a really, really good job of that. And, you know, we can, and we'll get to the sort of unfiltered part, I guess, but like the goal was like, hey, we'll get this thing and like sort of the halo or top of the mountain is like, you can go public. And it's like, oh, and MSPs are God, that'll be our stock ticker. Like that just MSP is going to be the thing. And so we felt like, oh my gosh, we kept the special all the way to being a big public company. And I don't know, maybe we can pick up the next chapter later in the conversation, but like, it was good all the way up to there. And so, yeah, can help you through sort of the rest of what happened. But yeah, all right, I'll pass the baton.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, Austin.
Yeah.
So we will get into the rest of that. We will not leave you hanging. Dave, my friend, next set to you. I think what I want to know and what we all want to know, how does someone like you go from Connect On MSP back in the 80s, right? Am I right on that?
Yep.
Well, that's
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah.
How do you go from walk me through those days of starting an MSP, probably before it was called an MSP in the 80s, when half of the room probably was not born, including CyberFox, into becoming one of the empires of the MSP space being ConnectWise? We've got to know the answer to how this happened.
So there's a backstory on that. And Tampa is, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's our hockey team. The Lightning, we're the Lightning capital of the world. And so back in the 80s, when we were just started installing Novell networks, that was the big network at the time, we would put these big, thick copper cables to connect, and we connected to the motherboard all the way to some type of HP parallel printer. And then, so we had this copper web running through the ceilings everywhere. And if the lightning bolt hits within a mile, 2 miles of a building, it creates a lot of static electricity. And that stuff all runs down. It would take out the motherboard, a couple network cards, some hard drives and things like that. And so we'd get the call 6 months after we installed this thing, and the people would say, hey, that equipment you sold us, it really sucks because it's smoking. So what we did at the time was we ran towards the fire. We decided we're going to go ahead and figure out how to ground the buildings really well. So we got this electrician that we kind of had hired, and all his work was with us. And we grounded those buildings really, really well. And then we started like really maintenance contracts. And that's the beginning of the whole, recurring revenue streams that we did. So we would go and say, okay, for $3,000 a quarter, we'll replace all hardware and we'll back everything up and restore it within 4 hours. And so we got a lot of takers on that, okay, because there was a lot of lightning hits, and Tico, our electric company here, kind of figured out how to do the grounding thing like 10 years after that. And so for the longest time, we were just out there just getting so many of these maintenance contracts to the point where we couldn't even really track it all. We had so much business. And that's the impetus of ConnectWise Manage. Because, it's like we had to have everything in there. We had to have all the equipment that's in there. And it took it was a lot of work. And so I think, Arnie was really, the brainchild of, putting that all together. I was more like the test monkey. So I'm sitting in there working, and they're looking over me saying, well, let's see, how could we make his job better and easier? And so that's, I was really the one, they just kind of watched me every step I made. And they really wrote ConnectWise Manage. I was patient zero with ConnectWise Manage. So, but it was really a fun ride in that sense. But it was really, the impetus was, I think because we're here, I'm not sure that would have happened if we were in Wisconsin where it's not as much lightning. So
that's a super cool story. And I want to pull more out. So how do you go from running an MSP to saying, I think there's something in the water here with this ConnectWise Manage thing? How do you go from that into what ConnectWise became today?
Well, Arnie was I remember Arnie went and he was an advisory board over Tech Data. Tech Data was right across the bay in Clearwater, St. Pete. And, other people on their advisory board started coming over to our office, and they saw our application. And they're like, oh, we want to use that. Can you give us a copy? And we're like, nah, we don't want to have to deal with giving you a copy. And I think we gave a couple people a copy, and then they kept calling us and asking us how to do things. And we kind of like, okay, we'll sell you a copy. And so we really just started selling it to the people on the advisory board at Tech Data, this advisory board Arnie was on. And lo and behold, Arnie gets kicked off the advisory board because they, hey, you're a vendor. You shouldn't be on here. So he gets kicked off by Tech Data. And then that was really, we started saying, hey, let's just start selling this software. And really, we started doing that full blast. I took over just running all the MSP. We were in the same building, kind of like we are now. And, we kept on growing it. I think the first year we sold 30 copies. The second year we sold 300 copies. And then, we got to the point where we were selling a couple hundred a month at some point. Yeah. Of the, ConnectWise Managed. So, and then we came and we bought some products, LabTech, Screen Connect, and Quozel. Yeah.
And at what point did you look back and say, what did we just do? Look at this.
Well, I'll tell you that the point that happened was, I remember I kind of played the role of the COO, CFO. And I remember every Monday, there was a period of time, every Monday, there would be 10 new employees standing outside my office because it was HR was right there. And then, we were onboarding 10 new people every Monday morning. And it was kind of like, you look at that, it's like, well, that's a little scary. That's how I certainly felt about it. It was like, I hope we can make sure that we can meet everyone's payroll and all like that. But we were expanded really, really quick. And I think that was like 2012-ish, probably, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
I love, maybe just last one for you, David. It seems like the story, just like Austin's the accidental entrepreneur, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're just solving problems, and here we go. And you take a look back, and you're like, what did we just do?
Oh, yeah. I would tell you that when I graduated from college, the last thing I would have ever wanted is to have 1,200 employees, because, you're like, if someone would have told you that right when you graduated from college, you're like, really? Is that a good thing? But it was 1,200 employees. And I think Austin and certainly can understand when you walk in the door and you can only know like 300 people by name, after that it gets a little hard. So, but it was a little difficult when you got 1,200 employees, but.
Love that. Love that. What a great peek into just ConnectWise's genesis and beginnings. And I also think it's awesome just to see that ConnectOn is still just right here. It hasn't changed. Well, it's changed, but it's still here today.
Yes, it is. They're in a fishbowl. We do make them, be our beta testers on every single one of our products, like it or not. They get it for free. So, in case any of them are in here. So if you're gonna bitch about being a beta tester, then you're gonna have to start paying.
I love that. I love it. All right, so Chris, time to hot seat you, my friend.
Yes.
So it had to feel good. Who uses ScalePad and every hand in here goes up, right? I mean, that's the coolest thing ever, right? It's something I think you dream, but you have no idea it could come true. I want to hear, but also IT Glue, right? And also fully managed, the largest MSP in Canada. I don't even know where to start with you, so I just want you to start. Give me the beginnings and how this whole thing came about.
Well, it's funny. So I remember Datto. I remember being at, I think it was at IT Nation one year. I'm trying to pick up what year this would be. Maybe like, when was the first year that Datto would have sponsored IT Nation? There was this tiny booth.
2013, 2014 maybe?
So okay, so I'll try to weave this together, but it was maybe around 2013. I was there as an MSP buyer, and you had a tiniest booth there with one person, one gal there, and it was just like the start of the idea. And then it would have been within 2 to 3 years of that. So I was in HTG peer groups. I was in service leadership and in the large MSP group with Paul Dipple, who a lot of people probably know. And I think we fully managed became one of Datto's probably largest customers. I think we ever shared. Like I think we were spending like over $1 million a year or something towards the end on Datto. So it's just so funny how that all ties together from like the rapid growth that you guys went through. My story on the IT Glue was in these peer groups that I was in. It was, sorry, put this down. So I'm sitting in a service leadership peer group with large MSPs, and everybody kind of shares best practices once in a while. And then it was just literally me showing an internal system that we'd built, which was literally the forefather of IT Glue, which was just some dashboards, some documentation, people listed, peace of mind index, a bunch of things that were in that tool. And then all the guys in this were like, "What the hell is that?" And then some of the guys were accomplishing this with Salesforce and other tools. Most people were doing it manually in spreadsheets and whatnot. And that was sort of at that point when I kind of had this little epiphany, like, oh, would it be helpful if I, accidental entrepreneur, would it be helpful if I made this available for you guys to try. And so that was the start of, what became like a 5-6 year journey to build that. I was backpacking through the U.S. With a banner on my back and at IT Nation as the sole attendee, and then the thing caught fire. And I think the biggest thing, like when we invest in companies now, the term I use is blue ocean, and I think that was what that category was at that time. For whatever reason, up to that point, documentation was just like not even considered. It was like, oh, well, we've got PSA and RMM, and so that's probably it. And so, yeah, struck a nerve. And to this day, it's still the most, rapidly growing business that I've been involved with. So I think we were, at its peak, we were probably doing 250 new customers every month, and new MSPs every single month. So, as we'll get to the after later. I'll let Austin lead that portion. But it was really fun until it wasn't.
It's a little foreboding.
No, it's still a great product. I mean, the only thing, if you talk about innovation, like maybe that's not quite where it could be, but that was great. Through that, obviously, ScalePad, starting out as warranty master. That was a whole nother journey that I went on. So, single purpose product. There was a tool that did warranty lookups and writing dates back. So we're like, well, that thing sucks, and it runs on Java, and this thing you have to install it on a server. We're like, oh, we could just do this with a SaaS-based app. So that was the start of it as warranty master. And then since then, really evolving into all the products that have been brought in under the ecosystem. That was a lot of learning. Some of those investments we made on the side and then brought them into ScalePad. Some of them were kind of built up within ScalePad. So it's been a lot of fun putting that together. And then on the top-down side, we got Joel at the back there. Still to this day now kind of giving back to the space and investing in companies that service MSPs, because I believe in this industry. It's where I've been my whole life. So
Love that. Absolutely love it. I know there's going to be a lot of audience questions for all of that. But that wraps up the panel. So, no, I'm kidding. So let's go back to Austin. I think people want to hear. And when we did this planning session, Austin made a comment to us. He said, "I'm not going to hold back. I'll just tell you everything I think." So
It's kind of my MO.
we're going to find out how this goes. But Austin, I think I do want to shift into the present day. I'd love for you just to share in your mind. It's really an open canvas for you to paint on in terms of where you believe the industry is at today, just even kind of how things have evolved into where they're at. I'd love to just open book on where you think things are at.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of a change, and there's been a lot of consolidation in this industry, and these things kind of come in waves and cycles. And I think that we're about to see a lot of deconsolidation in this industry, or that there's a lot of new vendors. And the owners of a lot of the core products that people rely on fired their engineering teams and are only capable of doing financial engineering. And so they play with the price of these things. They buy different things, and they're like, oh, look, we glued them together. And that's not actually integration. That's just a single sign-on. And they're like, well, they come in one bill and the bill's higher. And it's like, that's actually not innovation either. And so you see that these products sort of get to this point and they just coast. And they set up, programs inside the company, and you see this from the outside and you hear about it, and they're like, yes, we have told our leadership team to fire the highest paid engineers. And it's like, why would you do that? But I think that you run into this case where these things have consolidated into large blocks, and then the people who are managing those blocks and products don't wake up and think about what those products actually do, how MSPs actually use them, and the fact that, like, the technology industry is not the shampoo market. Like, this stuff is going to change all the time. And so you see it, that the boat is moving away, and that there's all these new vendors and new products and new technologies coming into the space. And that's really exciting, because that choice allows MSPs to pick different stacks, to build different things, and to be what you sell and what you sell aren't the same. And that you're like, no, we pick these products because they align for our customers, and somebody else might pick different products because they align for someone else. And what's actually really good for MSPs is that the barrier to build a product has gotten so much lower. And so the ability to sit down and code something up, like the LLMs, Copilot, Cursor, Replit, all these tools mean that you could sit there and write the next scale pad, write the next ConnectWise, and you don't need to be an incredibly good programmer to do it. And so we see this all over the place, these pockets of innovation, these pieces that are starting to bubble up that like the MSPs themselves are out solving these problems, and there's going to be a whole generation of new products coming. And so, if we were part of the first wave of like, well, let's switch from on-prem software to, SaaS, and like you started with just like, hey, we make software to solve the problem for you, right? And then managed to go through the SaaS transition as well. Like there's just going to be so much new stuff. And so that's exciting. And I'm like super happy that I don't run Kaseya. So like in that sense, like that would be so much harder in that like you have this big thing of disparate tech stacks. A lot of the stuff is 20 years old. And like, how are you going to drag this into the future? And like all they can do is discount it and bundle it. And like that's not, you're still dragging this bag of rocks. And so to see the new stuff coming is really, really exciting. And I think is also cool because it's so much more aligned with your business models. And that's the part that just makes me most scared is when these big vendors deploy stuff and it doesn't align with what MSPs need or want. And it's not like, hey, how can I make our partners make more money and grow faster? It's instead like, I would like some of our partners' margin. How can I get it? And like, that's not a winning strategy.
Okay. That's awesome. It's phenomenal, and I that makes me think of that Jim Barksdale quote years ago. There's only two ways to make money in this world: to bundle or unbundle, right? And I think you're right. We always see these ebbs and flows in the industry of bundling up, unbundling, and we're currently in a that phase where I think you're right. So David, I'd love your perspective on this as well. Just where the industry's at today. Is it healthy? What's good? What's bad? What should be changed? What do you think about where we're at today?
Look, the more things change, the more they're the same in some ways, I guess. I have an MSP practice, 42 years old now. I don't work over there as often as I used to back in the day. But I think there is a consolidation with the MSPs. You're starting to see these evergreens and these new charters. They're coming and buying up a bunch of MSPs. And, I look at that and I was like, does that work? Or is that just PE money coming in and kind of distorting things? And I think that's what Austin just kind of mentioned there is like, there becomes a distortion when the PE money comes in. Look, I'm a benefactor of the PE money, but at the same time, you look at what's happened at ConnectWise, then it just feels like there hasn't been any new innovation in the last 5 years. Okay, probably the last 7 years. So I guess I'm feeling that it is time to get a reboot going here. And I think what Austin was referring to is, you're able to, being a citizen programmer and being able to write something really quickly is coming. It's all that stuff is coming with artificial intelligence as time goes on. I wouldn't get too nervous about, oh gosh, I better figure it out now. I think the thing you want to do right now is you guys want to get out there and you want to start using the AI tools. Get that new iPhone. I know it's pretty rudimentary with it is.
No, you don't need an iPhone. Does not help you.
No.
It's nicer pictures, but that's it.
That's right. I know.
That's not
the pictures are actually the same. I compared both my phones, but no. I mean, look, there's Google's got some good stuff you can use for artificial intelligence. So I think being able to use it internally for your own MSP, and then you can start passing that knowledge on to all your customers. I think that's the first start on all this stuff. I think sometimes we all start looking. I remember when we had the .com boom in 2000. I remember that Arnie was coming to me and said, we got to get a .com. It's like, we got to get the .com. We got to get our .com, And so at the time, I think we all looked at the internet. We said, it's a billboard in the sky or in the virtual world. That's all we thought of it. We didn't realize that this, it's going to be a communication platform. We're going to be able to, distribute and install our software over it. So, but at the time, we saw it as you got to get a website and you got to have this giant billboard in the sky with this website. That was all we really saw. And then companies tried to go public with that. They had no sales. And then, of course, we had the .boom or .bus. So, yeah, I think that change is coming. I think it's part of the exciting part of being in this business is, it's like it's always changing. And I think all of us have to kind of make sure that we're, listening to, business podcasts, technology podcasts. I'm sure everyone does. But being able to get ready for this new move because it's coming. I think that you don't worry though. I think sometimes we overrate us. I think it was Ray Amora said this. He goes, we tend to overestimate the short run and underestimate the long run. Okay, so we always think, oh, these things are going to all happen right now. It's like no, but they will happen in the next 10 years, pretty significantly beyond anything we can all imagine.
Love that. One last question I have for you that I've been thinking about is, what about CyberFox today? How is it the same or different your second iteration after building ConnectWise? Do you see differences? Are you running things differently? Any things that you're trying to pursue or avoid based on lessons learned and experiences from the past?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the tools of today are so much better than what we had back in 2005. So you're able to just you can run a company easier and better because of all these tools, these SaaS tools that we're using internally to run our business. So, back then we had a little of a strange situation with ConnectWise. I used to say, hey, we got 1,000 employees. Maybe we should move to NetSuite. And that was blasphemy. When I told my brother, it's like, you mean move off ConnectWise to NetSuite? I'm like, yeah. I mean, we're the largest instance of ConnectWise at 1,000. This was back in 2012. And then, but that was blasphemy. But now the tools, these tools that you can run your companies with make it a lot easier than what we had. And we tend to just, we would throw bodies at things. We hire people and just, go over there and keep your finger in the dike over there, and so we would do a lot of that. And I think this time around, it's a lot more organized and a lot more efficient than the old days.
Yep, I can see that. All right,
So,
Chris.
05,
Oh.
you had SBS 2003, and I'll kind of have a soft spot for Small Business Server 2000. Oh, yeah. So it was like a run your own Exchange server day. Yes.
Yeah. I was just gonna key in on kind of what Austin was talking about. Like, I think what I'm seeing is everybody's talking about founder mode and kind of what that means, and I think something I'm passionate about, jumping back into the seat as CEO. It's like we need way more innovation, and we need to allocate more effort towards innovation, and so that's something I'm obviously really, really passionate about. I think we see a lot of startups coming in. I think we kind of often don't even know what we're looking at because there's a product that has 5 features, and then there's another one that has 5 features, but 3 of them overlap, and that's happening a lot, especially with AI and LLM based tools. So I think we're in for some exciting stuff to happen. I do agree with the decentralization of things, maybe breaking up an example. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but does the PSA break apart? Is the financial system and the PSA and the RMM and your documentation, do all those need to be in one, or should they be separate, or can we pick best of breed in different categories? Is there software that's better for certain verticals that'll do that better if I'm on the security side, and that one works better for this vertical, and there's another one for another vertical? So I think there's so much room for that innovation now. I think that the way the tools are being delivered, it's easier to sort of make these things API forward and build partnerships more quickly. So for me, really excited. I totally agree. I think the monolithic companies that aren't innovation forward are going to struggle in the next little bit here. I don't know if that's 3 years from now or if that's 10 years from now, but it's somewhere in there.
So let's pick up on that innovation forward. So you've been an innovator multiple times. What does it take, especially with ScalePad, as many products are in the suite today? How do you keep pushing that innovation forward?
It's expensive, but I think just even looking at it from the top level budget, which we did this year, it's looking at what do we spend by department and actually making a financial decision to shift it more towards innovation at the expense of sales and marketing and maybe other things. So we do that. We did that this year as an example. It's also complicated with a multi-product business, right? Each product has to have its own individual roadmap. You've got a portfolio roadmap. You've got a platform roadmap with all the data underneath all of that. That's a lot of things to manage. And I think we try, there's debt, I guess, if you think of it as debt, but we try not to think of it as debt. We try to think of it as we've got to remove the blockages so that every product can innovate on its own. And that's kind of what we went through over this last 2 years through all these acquisitions. And single sign-on is not a platform.
Preach it. Preach it. So keep the mic this way. We're going to now shift into the future. We're going to start with you, and then we're going to come back over to the left. I've just got a series of questions I'll just ask and pick into any of them that you wish. What do you see as the MSP of 2025 into 2030? Are they going to be the same? Are they going to be different? What do you think?
I think a lot of things have never changed. I think the one thing that's never changed is the relationship aspect. Something that we're passionate about is, when you have a client and they engage with you, what does that look like? So I think that's probably, documentation was kind of like my last big thing. I think the next one for me, the biggest missing piece is what's the last mile? How do we fix that? How do we make the best possible experience for your customer? What do they experience, whether that's help desk or security related or whatever the case may be? There's a lot of things that haven't been addressed there, right? We're still dealing text, email, tickets. Like, should that look that way? The other thing I would comment on is just over the last 10 years being in SaaS and then having run an MSP for a long time, I'm starting to see a lot of parallels between what is a SaaS company and what is an MSP. There's a lot of similarities in those businesses. And for over a decade in the SaaS industry, there's this thing called customer success. And customer success is often one of the largest departments for a recurring revenue model. And there's these roles called like CSMs. And so I believe that's where the rubber meets the road, is trying to figure out what pieces of this proven methodology to scale large SaaS companies in customer success are missing, and how do we apply those into the MSP business? Because that's really, at the end of the day, what customers want, is to be successful. Understand that what will make them successful, and then put forward strategies that will ultimately accomplish that. So I think for me, that's the next 10 years. It's an alignment of like managed services is like kind of managed X, like the managed relationships, manage success, so that customers feel that they feel a different experience. So that's my view.
Love that. Love that. So David, you mentioned that MSPs, we're seeing roll-ups, we're seeing private equity come into the MSP space. So we're seeing more MSPs conglomerating together. What do you think the future of the MSP looks like in the next 5 years? And do you think that there's room for startups to come into the space as a brand new MSP, or are they getting their lunch eaten by the big boys and there's no hope? What do you prognosticate in the future?
Yeah, I did think a lot of things stay the same. And small businesses, I think they are 61 million jobs in small business across America. This is just U.S. And that's about 45% of the employees in the United States. So that's the MSP community having to service that. Okay, so you guys are the trusted advisor. You have to have a seat at the table for all these small businesses, and they don't know how to do this stuff. They're expecting you guys to figure it out for them. Okay, and that's what you have to recognize. And I think that's going to continue to happen, and you guys are going to have to be the people that bring it all forward for them. And you'll be able to figure it out. You're going to figure it out because you're going to cross-pollinate, just like we did, back in the day when we started selling Datto or Zenith. We were like, well, we got rid of all the tape drives. We got all these new backups that actually worked, as opposed to these tape drives that didn't. So, and, I think you'll see more and more of that as we go. But I think small businesses are here to stay. Okay, and a small business, they don't want to deal with AT&T. They want to deal with, if it's a 10-person company wants their vendor to be a 10-person company. It has to be kind of level with each other, because that's the way you get that, the sincerity. Is how you get the best service. So I would say that that's going to continue. And because of that, I'm not sure the big roll-ups that are occurring are going to necessarily ever displace a well-run, and I call it like a little SWAT team of a 10, 25-person MSP. I don't think there's any disruption that's going to happen there. As long as you're kind of keep on learning the new technology. And, because I have my MSP, I have customers that I've had for 20 years. They're still with us, maybe some 25 years. I have an employee that's been with me 33 years. Gene, are you in here? There he is. Gene's been with me since 1991. Yeah, so So I'm just saying, as a small business, and that's all small businesses, they have like, these people all become family in the small business. So, I guess I'm just thinking it's that part of it never changes. And I think that personal relationship, that last mile, so to speak, will always be there.
And how about, MSPs have gone from just total T&M to managed service and adding all these new things in, whether it's managed backup and resiliency, it's the introduction of cybersecurity, more than just a firewall and a antivirus, into where we're at today, compliance as a service. What else do you foresee as the future for MSPs? Do you see it as heavy compliance as a service? Do you see AI coming in and MSPs having to juggle and manage through that? Do you see business transformation and automation? Like, what do you see as the future for MSPs beyond where we're at today?
Well, I often think about, the past, and, I'm doing 3x the work of my dad. Now, I'm not working 3 times more hours, but it's just that, I got a supercomputer in my pocket, so I can kind of like keep working all the time. And I think that keeps on going. I think that efficiency that every single, I call them knowledge workers, okay? All your customers, or they employ knowledge workers. Why? Because everyone's on a computer figuring out something from, on the knowledge of the computer, or off the internet, off whatever databases you have. But so the knowledge workers are going to become more and more and more efficient. Now, they're going to ask for more and more money, okay? And the only way you're going to be able to pay them more and more money is you better get more and more efficient with the tool stack that you have. But I think, certainly, some of these things become really, really easy, and they become part of the utility. The stack flattens on the bottom, okay? And you keep on climbing the ladder to new products, new product offerings. And, I think they come and they're no-brainers. I think Datto was one of those type of things. Like when you saw the Datto backup, it's like, well, I can install this. It works. This is a no-brainer. It made my life a whole lot easier. I've just freed up hours and hours and, hundreds of hours of not having to do restores anymore. So I think you're going to see more and more of that type of innovation. And I think that, yes, you're going to have to become good at, there's going to probably be 40 things in your stack instead of 20. Back 10, 15 years ago, there was like 5 things in the stack, PSA and RMM, antivirus, firewall, there wasn't much there. So, but, we did have to take care of all the servers under the roof. The Microsoft Small Business Server was a fantastic product, by the way. But anyways, my point is I think a lot of this was still to stay the same.
Yeah, I love that. So Austin, over to you now. So when you're finished with your endeavors of this coal mine into a park or whatever it is,
Power plant.
there we go. Cause it's close.
The coal mine would be a really boring park.
Got it. Well, maybe that's next.
Yeah.
So if you were to come back into the MSP space, what would you go build, or what would you go do?
Oh man, I think you'll have to watch and see what I do versus like me tell you what I would do. But I think that the MSP space is ripe for disruption, and that a lot of, just to dovetail on sort of what these guys said, the same change that's happening in the MSP space is happening everywhere else. The same stagnation of big platforms is happening everywhere else. You look at it that like G Suite gets more irritating. The same thing, Office 365 gets more irritating. They try to jam more crap into it. They try to change the pricing around. Like, all these things are going to undergo the same pressure and those same changes. And even at an architectural level, like, is your next laptop going to be x86 or ARM, right? And then will your software stack work correctly in that scenario? So there's just so much going on where like people need MSPs as part of the process to guide them through all this change. And I also think that, the big companies don't get it, or like they really struggle with the idea that like at the small business level and really everywhere, this is like a quote from the founder of StorageCraft. And he said like the best part of business is you get to pick who you do business with. And so like people want to interact with other human beings, and that they don't care that the AI is offering them 8% off to order before the end of the evening. It's like, no, it's my sales guy, like Carlson, he's going to hook me up. I know. And like you have that relationship. And so they want that connection the same way that like when something is wrong, they want that MSP to be there to help them fix it. And maybe they don't have this tier of support or this piece, but the MSP is like, you know what? We'll solve this for you now. I trust you. I believe, and like we'll fix it, and then we'll figure out where we need to go. And so I think that's important. But yeah, I think the future for me in the MSP space, like just gotta wait, unfortunately.
I like.
But yeah.
We can wait. One last question for you, then we're going to turn it over to the audience. So be cooking up what questions you have for one of the three folks. We'll pass the mic around.
You literally did not follow up after data went public.
That's right.
So like you went right past it. Uh-huh.
There's the first question from David to Austin.
No, what was your
I'll
last
let you
question?
know. Well, we got to answer this one first.
Oh, now I got to answer this one first. All right. So this is like in the journey of like learning about companies, and like it turns out like the MSPs at HTG did not fully go through boardroom dynamics for public companies. So yeah, what happened is Datto went public, and then no one cared. Like Datto is not an AI company. It's not really a cybersecurity company. It's just sort of got forgotten about, and so its stock price was like flat. But Tim, who was running Datto, because I did not want to be a public company CEO, was doing a great job, and Datto was making more money every quarter. Like, and we knew how much money we were going to make into the future, because like we understood, hey, MSPs are pretty reliable, and they pay their bills, and they say what they want to do, and so like we kept doing better, and our stock kept staying the same. And so what actually happens in that case is this weird thing where all of a sudden your company's price is too cheap, and so some MBA student somewhere, like working for some private equity firm, goes, oh, I ran this math algorithm and I've calculated out the following, that these companies are underpriced based on their earnings, and the predictability of their revenue is indicative that we could purchase this and we might be able to make some money. And so that happened, and a bunch of PE firms and other sort of sharks started swimming around the water, and you get like these messages that are like, Fancy and Fancy Co. is interested in purchasing your business, and we have fancy offer for many, many dollars. And so then you have to like have an emergency board meeting just before Christmas, and it's super annoying. And you're like, no, Fancy Co., we choose no. And so you say no, and then eventually there was somebody that like really wanted us, and so they kept upping the number, and then it got to the point where like the independent board members and the lawyers and stuff were like, like you kind of run into this problem where like you, as a board member of a public company, you have actually board member of any company, you have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the shareholders. And so if I was to think about it, it's like, well, think about all the MSPs that bought Datto stock. And so like those MSPs are asking for me to generate a return from them. And the number was so high that you're like, you could literally be sued for not saying yes. And so was like, okay, like we have to engage and like have a conversation. And so we started having the conversation, and it was Insight. Which is not a surprise. And so had a conversation with Insight, and they were like, hey, like we want to do this thing that PE companies do, which is like it's a turd particle collider. We take two pieces of crap and slam them at each other so hard that they become diamonds. And that is possible. Like if you took two pieces of shit and fired them at each other hard enough, you would get a diamond. But so that's the dream, and they're like, we can use all this leverage and banks and lawyers and just really get these things flying at each other super hard. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so we had that conversation, and the team at Datto actually was like pretty convinced that they wanted the Datto team to stay on, and it was not until like we got to basically like, hey, we're writing the press release, and they were like, oh, JK, y'all lose your job. And so that was unfortunate. And yeah, like we had a conversation. There was a whole component of like, we could stop this. There are ways to do that. But I think the team had felt like there was so much momentum along the process. And so then at least for me, like I had a meeting with people at Insight, and I said basically the same things I said when Datto sold majority control to Vista. And it was like, the things that matter at Datto are the people. You got to take care of the people. The relationship with the MSP is all about the people. And like, if you do that, like the product will take care of itself. And so like, don't cut the healthcare, don't get rid of the snacks. Like, these are super stupid ways, like, to save money, and like there are much better ways to save money. And so had that conversation, and then Insight's like, what we'd like to do is the opposite of that. And so they did that, and I like wrote a letter, and I was like, this is a bad idea. And then Fred called and was like, I don't like these letters. And I was like, okay. He's like, why don't you say this shit to my face? And I was like, all right, here you go. And, and said some stuff to his face, and like was just like, cool. But like they didn't do, what we would have hoped. And to be honest, like, it's kind of like the painful part of capitalism, because like it's not, it's unfortunate because there was magic there, and like the team had managed to make it a really long ways and to get to 2,000 people, and like there's still that magic was somehow inside there, and like 2,000 people is a shitload of people to get them all to care about data backup. Like, it's really hard. And yeah, so the good news is that like there is creative destruction, and new things will come about, and I think that like the period that we're in now will not last forever, and that's why I'm excited about all of the new things that are coming along and that are being built, and it's really cool, and I'm super lucky that like I get to be involved in them.
Okay, I love that. I'm glad we went that direction. All right, thank you for the brutal honesty. I think we appreciate that. And that dovetails into that last question I was going to ask you. What should MSPs be thinking about and being concerned about for their business in the next few years? Like, if you're in their shoes, what should they be concerned about?
I think like for any business owner, what got you here won't get you there. And so everything great, you've got a good model, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's change, it's happening, this stuff is changing, there's sort of this, tech generational changeover that's occurring, and how this stuff plays out. And I think paying attention to the new things, thinking about how to adopt and balance the new things is important. I know that's super uninsightful advice. So I'm trying to think of like, what else? I think the other piece is maybe like, trust the relationships that you have, and that like relationships with humans are durable. Like, you're in business to interact with other humans. And we used to say this at Datto a lot, and like we had nicer ways of saying it and blunt ways of saying it, but like don't fuck the customer. And we mean that both figuratively and literally, because you'll get fired if it's literally. But yeah, like that caring back and forth, if you don't screw over your customers, like it's amazing they treat and understand that you're different, and that unfortunately, like as consumers, we just see it, and then we sort of just accept it as normal, that like the businesses and the things that we interact with are just constantly trying to screw us over. And it's like, I don't know, I bought a rug this weekend, and like I've gotten 10 emails from the company that sold me the rug. And it's like, I don't need 10 emails. I'm also not going to buy more rugs because I only need one for front hall. Like, it's just this kind of stuff of like, oh, I'm just going to push and push. Oh, buy now, act now. I'm going to send you all this emojis, urgent. It's like, you're just screwing over your customer. Like, what are you doing? And it's the same thing. Like, you look at Microsoft has lost the plot, and like Windows wants me to have Candy Crush installed on every new install. Like, why? Like, just don't do that. If I don't want to use Edge, don't make me use Edge. If I don't want my search bar to be all stupid or add that extra button, it's like, oh, look, traffic and just news chum shit. Like, oh, by the way, you want to turn it off, have fun in the registry, go find the key. Like, that's why you know that the MSP industry is going to exist forever, because you got to go turn that shit off for people, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I can use my computer again. But so many things around you are just like actively, whatever it is, the thing that you want to do. And it's like, no, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, no, I just wanted to read the article, man. And they're like, sign up, get an email, get this, get it. And it's just, that stuff is so frustrating. And so there's this ability for you to be that breath of fresh air and like actually be like, no, I'm aligned. Like, I want to see your business grow because you're going to hire 5 more people, and like, you'll pay me for those seats, and that will work. And people, really? Yeah, that's what I want. And like, it just will feel so different than like, surprise, sale, new thing, additional cost, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're now, have you thought about tipping your MSP? Like, like it just, like, people are going to hate that. Yeah, watch it. Now that's a new thing. No, I don't think so. Automated car washes ask you to tip them, which is nuts. But yeah. So, looking after your customers is how you're going to stand out, especially in a world that's like inshitifying around you. And I think that that's probably like the most valuable thing, and certainly like what I focus with all the businesses that I interact with. All right.
Love that. So we have a hard stop at 5. Is that right, Danielle? So we're going to go for a little bit longer. We have time for questions, and we'll just see how long we go. But we will stop right at 5 because we've got to. So who's got the first question? I'm going to run a mic over.
To your comment, Austin, about the change in things and developing our own applications, I see a lot of low-code solutions now starting to hit the market. Do you think that that's an area that MSPs can leverage in building those solutions? Because I also foresee software development maybe tracking that way as well, at least part of it. And is there going to be a competition situation there, or are we going to be able to leverage those kinds of companies to develop low-code solutions? How do you think that's all going to pan out?
I mean, I think the answer is like low-code solutions let you build fast. And if you build something and it's valuable, and you're like, you need to graduate from the low-code solution, you already know that there's a market, or you know that it's delivering value, and you can pay someone to write it in a not low-code way. And the closer you get to the code, the more valuable it is. But the good news is that like even the stuff like the modern IDEs that you can use, like they're so much better at like, hey, your syntax is wrong, or you're like, I don't know how to do this thing, so I'll just write a comment of like, and then we did the magical great thing, and all of a sudden IDE is like, boop, and it just like adds the line. And so like that's helpful that you're not out like trudging through Stack Overflow of like, how do I do this again? And so like that stuff ends up being super helpful and makes you more efficient as a software engineer. But building tools that solve problems, like however you build them, if you've solved a problem, it's like a win. And so I wouldn't be like, oh, we won't do this. Like if these things can make your lives helpful and easier, like do it, use them.
Really appreciate the insight, guys. As maybe investors in software companies, or what you're looking at for innovation, besides having a cool, Ubuntu tattoo or www initials, what do you guys look for as you're making investments? What do you look for in the founders or the background of the company when you make decisions to invest?
So I don't know. I guess we can pass down the line. I run a venture firm. It's called Outsiders Fund. We invest in really weird stuff. And as you might know, I encounter a lot of weird stuff, and I'm into just random things. So we're looking for people who are super passionate about crazy or different off the beaten path areas. And I think that that energy to like run through walls, and that like they're determined to go get there, like that's super important. And then I think the other piece is like you have to balance that with coachability, because there are some people that are like determined to run through walls, and you're like, well, maybe those are the wrong walls, and they're like, it doesn't matter, and like that runs off the rails. And so finding that balance is super hard. But then they have to sort of just really love what they're doing. And so like I almost always ask like, why out of all the problems in the world are you solving this problem? And like that answer to me is always really interesting.
So the question is why, or what's the criteria that will do the investment? All right, for me, I mean, we did quite a few purchases at ConnectWise, and then, we've done some, Adam and I've done some with CyberFox. Look, if it's easy, the formula is easy. Find companies that have like at least 100 paying customers that are raving fans. Okay, because that you've got something there, because there's a lot of people paying every month for their product. Okay, and you see that it's magical. It's going to take off. That it's going to at least adopt 3,000 MSPs. So I would say that's one of our criteria, is try to find that type of situation. And they're out there too. There's a lot of them that are out there. And I usually just go ask my MSP saying, would you use this product? It helps having them, because they'll kind of call shit on something pretty quick.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well covered. I think from my perspective, our perspective, top down, we're looking. I think one of the things that gets overlooked often, at least the companies we look at, we look specifically in MSP, specifically in SaaS, is the total addressable market, TAM. And a lot of times there's tremendous solutions that are out there that, you know, maybe only fits a very small slice of the MSP segment, or maybe it's not something that an MSP's customer can take advantage of, like Datto, where there's a downstream effect of that product. So I think there's opportunities for both. Like, you can build a really huge PSA company and have nothing else, and that's an operational sell to product. And then, you know, we get weirded out all the time too, because we see new stuff that's around AI, or kind of rethinking the ticket, or you know, these kind of things where you kind of have to, you know, get the first 100 customers, or kind of see around the corner in some way that hasn't been done. So that, what I can say is there's a ton of good ideas out there. I think it's easier than ever to spin something up. I think it's still the hardest thing is like get that to market, and how are you going to get 1,000 customers? Like, it's still a problem. So yeah, I guess maybe that's some perspective. And then obviously the founders, the entrepreneurs behind it are the most important thing. Like, if we can work together, we can make it work.
One of the always the biggest things I look at is you have to have a good idea of what you want to do. You have to have a plan on how you're going to implement it. You got to make sure the customers understand what you're doing. But it's the employees. And I'm just curious, Austin, I never heard the story about the cars before, but I know a few of your former employees. And I find it amazing of how your vision seems to have passed down to them. Did you hire that? Did you look for that? Or did it just rub off on them? Because to me, the most important thing about an MSP is not what my idea is, or not what my customers want, is to make sure my employees all understand what our idea is and they follow it. Just wonder if you have any advice what you're looking for in this whole Generation Z, or Z for us Canadians. I don't believe in that. I believe if you don't pass the information on to your employees that they understand what your vision is, how can you ever expect them to do it? I'm just wondering if, I'm looking at you, Austin, but actually all three of you, if you have any advice on how to make that culture really take off for your company.
I think first and foremost is like you have to be real, and like they look to you as the culture carrier, and whatever your bad habits are, whatever your good traits are, they're going to see and understand all of that. And so for me, as we got bigger, like being super intentional about the things that we did and about how we talk about stuff, and we had values, we loved our values, but like we're never going to write them on the wall. Like that's not the way to do it. You got to live them every day. And then when you make choices, you can refer back to like, here's why we did this. And it's like, because we always want to choose the best answer for the customer, or, you know, here's why so-and-so is doing this or this and that. And like tying them back to the values is super important. I think the other piece, like a little bit, our last value was do your life's work, and helping get people to the idea that like what they're doing at Datto could be their life's work. And no one goes to school or graduates college and is like, you know, my life's work is going to be data backup. I'm going to be really good at it and it'll be great. Yeah, so like that doesn't happen. But instead, helping them understand that like the product that we serve, like, or sell, solves a real problem. Like we have lots of stories of people that has helped their businesses, it's saved lives, it's been super involved. And so like, you know, MSPs are very connected to like real issues, and tying all the way through what you're doing to like actually helping somebody. And this idea that it has an impact in the world is so important. And then this idea that whatever you're doing is not in stasis. And so as an employee, the concept that you can impact where the company is going, how it's getting there, how those decisions are made, like is so empowering. And then it is, because your life's work might be, well, I'm part of this team, or like I'm enabling this stuff, or I'm the person that writes the internal staff magazine at Datto, and lots of people read it and care about it, and it really, you know, makes somebody's month when they're in it, and we write a whole thing, like that kind of stuff. Like you'd be surprised, like each of these little things, you want to take it and be like, this is important. And there's a way that you could look at it and go like, that's the most trivial shit I've ever heard of. Or you can be like, wow, this matters. And it's how you treat those pieces. And the more you kind of build that in, like, your culture will select for it, and it will eject the people who don't believe it. And you've got to be willing to eject sometimes high performers who don't believe, because you're sort of seeking this one thing.
So one of the great things we ran into with CyberFox is Adam brought it over from his other company, is EOS. How many people are doing EOS? Okay, so the EOS platform, we went into a room and probably for a whole day, and we came up with our core values for CyberFox, right? So, we spent a lot of time thinking about it, and now we use these core values for everything. We go over in our quarterly meetings, all-up meetings with all the employees. We'll go through the core values and who exemplified those core values. We'll do a little call out for all of them. And then even when we're interviewing people, we're showing them our core values, saying, hey, can you get in line with this? Okay. So I think it's really important to, formalize those values, because just like Austin said, you have to get everyone running the same direction. And you might have someone that's a very high performer, but if they don't believe in the core values, they're going to cause a problem for you in the long run. So yeah, really kind of just writing down those core values and then posting them all over your office too.
Yeah, I'll add one thing. I think building off of EOS, I think just in my experience over the last many years, there's often this really strong vision. So if you think of a triangle, like vision at the top and execution at the bottom, what I found often, and EOS solves for this, is like we have a strong vision and we got people working really hard. The strategy is the middle, and that's the one that most employees, if you ask them, will say, I don't understand the strategy. And so the more, like, every success that I've had is where we were crystal clear on that. With Fully Managed, it was we want 10 million in 10 cities, then we want to sell to TELUS. And everybody, that would be an example. And then that's kind of like how that went. In the SaaS companies, it's like we want to grow by this percentage, and then breaking that down by product, and then being specific, but who's contributing for marketing, sales, et cetera. So I think the strategy part, it's like you do it once, you could do it once a year, and it's like you then don't make decisions that are distracting, and people hate change. And so if we can hold ourselves to the strategy piece, that's the piece that I see is often missing. We don't have a clear strategy. If you ask that question of all of your employees, it'd be interesting to see what the feedback might be on that.
So the three of you kind of played a pretty pivotal role in making becoming an MSP super easy for anybody who wants to call themselves an MSP. That's kind of bad for the MSP industry at large, because when we start getting into like cybersecurity, somebody who doesn't know anything about security being able to advertise that they sell the same thing as very mature organizations on paper is bad for customers. How should MSPs start differentiating themselves from people who just can show up and now go to one giant company who bought all of your companies and sell an identical stack and put their logo on the marketing stuff that they just give you? They're like, here, just put your logo here, and now you're an MDR, you're in everything, and you can charge half the amount because you're two guys in a basement and not 40 in multiple cities who actually know this stuff. Like, how do you differentiate at this point other than be human and try to convince them that they're making a bad choice?
I mean, I think you want to differentiate on the tech stack, right? And like, those people are opening McDonald's franchise, and like, okay, great. Like, yeah, it's McDonald's, but like, you as an MSP, do you want to be McDonald's? Do you want to be fine dining? Maybe you're just Applebee's, but like, what is the thing that you are? And I think that it's important to like pick and specialize, and generally, like, it's actually super helpful in those conversations when you're up against that other person. And if they don't know what they're doing, is to ask, you almost want to phrase the question back to them of like, well, what businesses do you not work with and why? Right. And so like, you as an MSP, you might be able to, as a 40 person, be like, well, we only do these kind of businesses of this size, and we specialize in, I don't know, architecture and engineering firms, and we know how AutoCAD works and why it's awful better than anybody else. And so we can set it up. And like, this other guy, that's great that he can do all the cybersecurity, but like, AutoCAD is going to crash and he won't be able to find the temp files, and like, those engineers are going to cry. And so like, that's that piece of like demonstrating a little bit of depth of knowledge and narrowness. And that there's so much success comes from actually saying no. versus trying to be everything to everybody. And that's like almost always like my recommendation of like, how do I differentiate? And it's like, do less and just be really good at the less that you do.
For me, we used to call those MSPs trunk slammers. Okay, I don't know if they call them that, but it was like, it's trunk slammer. You want to work with them because we were always higher price. And I think in this day and age, getting your compliances, get your SOC 2, get some of those compliances because those other people won't. Okay, so I think and look, all this is most of these people want to buy from someone they know and trust. So I think that comes first, and that's that whole human element of driving over and seeing them. So like I know that a lot of this business can be done remotely, but at our MSP, we actually go to every single customer and we say, we want to come over one day a month, and we're always going to make it the second Tuesday of every month. And Gene's going to be there, and he's going to work on your system. He'll be there at 8 a.m. He's going to reboot the, whatever you got, your firewalls. He's going to basically, we're just showing up to get FaceTime, so we can talk to him and show him, hey, where we are. Look, yeah, you pay us $3,000 a month, and we're here. We're here for you. And so load up on all your questions you have. Gene's going to be there the second Tuesday of every month. And so Gene goes there, and he might end up with 8 hours worth of work, just kind of doing all these little things where people want a human to kind of walk them through it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's sort of like trying to figure out, which I think the MSP industry has been trying to figure out for a long time, is how do we get out of the server room? How do we get into the boardroom? And I think that's the last mile that I was talking about earlier. That still is the differentiator. I think like verticalization is awesome. I think compliance, GRC in general is one of the most exciting ways to start to drive those higher level conversations that we've had in a while. And yes, I think really trying to figure out how do the trusted advisor has always been in quotes. And I think that what I've seen is it's not a size thing necessarily. You've got like 5-person MSPs that are really, really, really mature in their delivery of customer experience and vCISO and different things like this. And then you've got massive MSPs, 500 employees that are an absolute hot mess. And so there's everything in between that. I think that the opportunity that exists now that maybe wasn't there 10 years ago is, do I need to be regional? Could I be national? Could I be international? If I'm really focused on medical and I'm really good with medical frameworks and I'm having that conversation like in all the tools and apps and different things that they use, I think that opportunity exists more than it ever did. And you can look really, really smart to those people. Where I think if you support 6, 7, 8, 12 different industries, it's pretty tough to be that to everyone.
I have one bad experience with an MSP that tried to be national. There's a certain MSP that was in Colorado, and I thought it'd be a really cool idea to sell a Datto appliance to the former First Lady and former Secretary of State and back up all their email. And they did not know what they were doing, and we would not have recommended our product for that use case. We can talk about that later, but that's a whole nother fun story. So stay in a lane, please, when you can.
Lessons learned on how to stay away from testifying in front of Congress, right? It's fantastic. So we're out of time. First of all, I just want to say to all of you, to Austin, to Dave, to Chris, you did not have to come to this. You did not have to come and spend time with us. And I think we would agree this has been just an awesome time. Get to know you more, learn more about the industry. So just huge round of applause for you guys. Thank you so very much.